move like it would with this lithium polymer battery.
What is the input voltage range for Arduino power?
Oh, yeah, it's pretty forgiving. You can go down to 5 volts, but you probably want 6 through 12-ish. 12 is getting borderline. 9 volts is good, 7 volts is good, 6, something around there is pretty much perfect.
So it has a voltage regulator?
It has a voltage regulator built in, yes. And some of the cheaper Arduino options don't. And you can take just an Atmega chip and hardly any parts and build something like an Arduino without the voltage regulator. But if you have the whole board like that, then it's pretty Catholic about what power it'll take. And one other thing is that I tried powering the truck. I have a wall spud, one of those universal AC power supply things. It claims that it supplies an amp, which should have been plenty, right? And so I powered both the Arduino and the motors from that, wouldn't move it at all. So I think they're lying about that 1 amp rating. So don't really trust power supplies when they tell you that. Okay. Now I talked a lot about reading from the serial port, like when you're reading from the rangefinder or something like that. And I mentioned that you can also write to the serial port, so you can send commands to your Arduino while it's running. And that looks like this. Basically, you ask how many characters are available, and then you read them. And on the other end, on your Linux box, open a serial port and write to it. So the code is easy on both sides. And the question is, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to send commands to your Arduino? Well, finally she gets to the shark. Yeah, what if you have your air swimmer shark and you aren't satisfied with it and you want it to do more? So I don't know if you've seen one of these sharks before. You have a controller and it has 2 buttons. Each button goes 2 ways. So this goes left and right to beat the tail back and forth. This goes up and down, which controls. This thing drives on a track, which controls the attitude of the shark. So when it swims, it'll swim more down or more up. And that's all very well, except this tail beating thing, you have to keep beating it. You have to go left, right, left, right, left, right. And that gets tedious really fast. And, isn't that the sort of thing that computers are for, right? Automating repetitive tasks.
Use your rangefinder again.
So there are 2 ways you can do it. Of course, you can put an Arduino on the shark and have it put sensors on it and have it decide where to go. But I thought that for my first experiments, unleashing a fully autonomous robo-shark on an unsuspecting audience might not be a good idea. Legal issues and everything. So what I decided to do was leave the controller in place so I can still use the controller on the shark and use it normally. And I can override it if something goes wrong. But talk to the controller from the Arduino controlled from Linux. And that way my Linux box can make the shark swim around. So of course, as soon as I got the controller, I ordered this just to do this project. But I had been wanting an excuse to order an air swimmer shark anyway. And the first thing I did was unscrew the controller, which is the first thing you should always do with any new hardware, right? And fortunately, it was really simple. I thought it was going to be much harder than this, but obviously, you can see the switches right there. This is going to be easy. And, okay, so we have 4 more screws. And this is the back of the same board. And each of the switches has 4 connectors. So these are the places where I soldered my wires. So I've got wires going into power and ground. It turns out I don't need power, but I wasn't sure, so while I was in there, I added one. 4 wires, 1 for each button. And then I put it all together, and I should have taken a picture while I had the wires there, but I didn't. So I got this nice ribbon cable. You can't actually buy 6-conductor ribbon cable as far as I can tell, but you can pull it off a wider ribbon cable. And I've got these little frayed ends on which I tinned some solder so I could plug them into the breadboard. And then what I have here is a transistor. Now again, I mentioned I'm not great at hardware. I have to ask people every time I do these sorts of things. How am I going to do this? And I thought relays were the way to go. And I bought many different relays, always finding that it was the wrong sort and there was something wrong with it and I couldn't get it to work. And I tried opto-isolators, thinking that was going to be, and this is because I'm afraid of transistors. But transistors are sort of black magic, and I wasn't sure how to use them. But okay, finally I got over my fear of transistors, and I found a good circuit online, again with help from IRC. And this is the circuit. It's pretty easy. And I'm using a button at this point to just test. I'm not actually going from the controller buttons. But this is my circuit. So I have a 1K resistor for each button. I have a transistor going to one of the digital outputs, a wire to ground, and a wire to the sharp button. So
did you measure the voltage on the little sharp transmitter to see what
yeah.
the button is?
Yeah, the buttons are high normally, and when you press them, they get grounded.
And well, what's the high voltage?
Oh,
What's battery voltage?
I think it's got 2 AAAs, so it's 3 volts.
So you should be able to
as I
connect
recall.
it directly to the
Yeah.
Arduino without the transistor.
There was some reason that didn't work. But the Arduino, but the Arduino signals are 5 volts, not 3.
Okay.
On the Arduino, you can power something with 3 volts, but logic signals are 5. But, I mean, I guess I could have, yeah.
You don't have open drain devices.
Yeah, right, now you can actually get 3-volt Arduinos. The lily pads that I mentioned that are used for clothing, those are 3-volt. And I think you can get other models that are 3 also, but I was working with a normal one, with a 5-volt one.
My microcomputer uses 3 volts, and when I need to go to 5, it's
Yeah. Okay, so I mentioned that I was going to talk about why it's nice to have a proto shield. And this is why it's so nice to keep this all together and not have to plug it in every time. So I've got my proto shield, I've got my controller, glasses. And then where's my other Arduino? Ah. Turn it off.
What's a 2N2222 go for these days?
Mine happened to be in a package I got from Radio Shack, so probably 10 times what they normally go for. I don't know.
I just bought like 100 from Jayco for like $2, $3.
Yeah, I probably paid that much for 6 or 8 of them.
What's that?
So we need the code. Oh, and I haven't talked about the code, and I don't actually have a slide on it, but so it's a little bit longer, and again, I won't go over it in detail, but what it's doing basically is writing, it's reading a protocol. Like I can send, R300, and it'll move the tail right for 300 milliseconds. It's that sort of thing. So this is just reading the serial port and doing appropriate things.
It's a domain-specific language that you've invented in Python.
Yes, it's a domain-specific language that I invented in Python. And then, so that should be running, and I'm going to turn the transmitter on and release the shark.
Release the shark.
You know what I didn't do, though? One thing about shark is that he needs some ballast, because otherwise, it's pretty close actually, but I'm gonna give him some ballast. So he doesn't float up to the ceiling, because that would be a drag.
We need laser ballast. Freaking laser beams.
Ballast resistor doesn't work either. It's a little too much. The shark comes with clay that you put into this receptacle.
Pretty good.
Nice, okay. That'll be fine.
Especially with Arbu done. Arbu done.
Okay, so transmitter is on. This is unfortunately infrared, so one problem with it is that you have to keep these lights pointed approximately at the shark.
Done, 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 done.
Duh, 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 duh. Okay, now I'm going to try manual control first. I think I need a little more ballast though. I just don't want to lose him in the ceiling.
How long does it take for the helium to leak out?
It'll stay for several weeks. They say a month, but I haven't. See, there he goes. Run away, shark.
I'm pumping away.
In that case. Yeah, it is.
Neutral
I was
boys.
supposed to do this before, but I don't think the air outside would have been the same temperature.
Go ahead and fly shark blue.
Okay. Now, in theory, manual control should work, and it does. So I haven't messed up manual control. I haven't destroyed my shark. And then I have my little shark window program. This is a very minimalist program. Cool.
It wouldn't last 2 seconds.
I bet you get it free.
A little trouble getting him down. Yeah, there we go.
Dive, dive.
Flood cue, flood cue.
Remember, professional courtesy.
Is he a lawyer?
And that's just it. As I mentioned, I have to keep the controller pointed.
Is this a homing shark?
So you need another Arduino app to keep the laser target.
Yeah.
I can see the use
So
of
now
the
you're gonna do sonar
accelerometers
range
now.
fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see.
And the range finder.
Is that the range?
Yeah, it's, oh, I think it's the projector.
It's blinded.
We have to give him a
The projector? What does it have to do?
yeah, that's a.
Emergency down.
It's definitely demonstrating the concept of taking over the world as far as I'm concerned.
World domination.
Need a fleet of these.
Thank you, lovely assistant.
Is this the first time a shark has flown around Silicon Valley controlled by limbs? This is the first time a shark has flown around Silicon Valley controlled by a penguin?
But does it qualify as a flying fish?
So as you see, he needs a little more training. Hey, this way.
It's pretty good though.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
That was a pretty great turn.
Hey. No, back this way.
Yeah, I'm going.
Okay, straighten out. Yeah, there you go. All right, Bruce.
Heel, boy.
What are the numbers in the display on your?
Oh,
That's milliseconds, isn't it?
oh, yeah. Yeah, that's milliseconds that it'll send so the amount of time it'll send that impulse on that line.
Okay.
Seem to have lost my shark leash, but maybe he'll stay.
You can still attach
I think it's
stuff.
over here, over there.
You get them tied up.
Here, let me have your shot.
Over here?
That's basically the end of the talk anyway.
That's your leash.
Gilbert just happened to come out with this right when I was working on this project. But mine flies.
It is there.
Oh, it is, okay. Never walk your shark without a leash. It helps if your leash actually stays attached. Anyway, if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them or pass them along to Bruce here.
Questions, anyone? Questions?
So what's the name of the package? Arduino software?
Oh, it's just called Arduino. Go to arduino.cc and click download.
That's CC.
Good question. I don't know.
Carbon copy.
Yeah.
Cocoa Islands, I think.
Oh, islands. Yeah, why they picked CC, I don't know. Why it's not .it or something. Yes.
There, this is part of the Open Hardware Initiative, I believe. And there is another community with the BeagleBoard. You may know about that. And I think they just came out with the BeagleBone, and there is a BeagleBoard XM, which are more high-end hardware. With
Microchip has a 32-bit, yes.
Yeah.
That fits the Arduino.
Yeah, BeagleBones actually are not so much Arduino competitors, partly because they're much more expensive. They're real computers. I mean, they're full-fledged computers. They can talk to displays. What they don't have is analog input or output, so you have to use an analog to digital converter if you want to do Arduino type stuff with them. But for digital input and output, they're okay. I went to some Beagle talks at Scale, and actually it sounded like the kernels they normally use on them. No, it's not the kernels. It's that they have GPIO inputs on the chip, but they aren't actually exposed on the board, so you have to do some soldering if you want to do that. So, you know, they can be used for that, but they're not really aimed at that market. They're aimed at other things. Now, the Raspberry Pi, on the other hand, apparently does have exposed GPIO, so when we're finally able to order them, it will be...
Order them, they're just not in until the first week of next month.
I haven't even been able to order them. You can...
I ordered one Sunday night from Newark.
Okay.
I got a confirmation on Monday that I did.
Okay, because every time I go to either of the sites, I get, you can register interest. And
So what is a Raspberry Pi?
a Raspberry Pi is an ARM-based board, which is much faster and more powerful than Arduino, It can do digital input and output, no analog. But it should be very good for things like embedded robot operations. And I think once I have my car working, I might get a Raspberry Pi for that, because it could do things like image processing that the Arduino isn't really fast enough to do. And they might work well together. You know, as you see, the Arduino works well as a data collection device for a Linux box, and it would work that way for a Raspberry Pi too. You could plug it into a Raspberry Pi, collect data from your Arduino, and then process it on the Raspberry Pi, or any combination.
So can you use new debugger on?
Not on the Arduino. There is no debugger I know of, but the programs are so simple, normally you don't really need to debug the program logic. You know, you're more debugging your circuit and the Linux side of it.
So I've been working with the STM microcomputer, it's $10 for the discovery kit. So it's sort of the opposite, that you have USB, but it only works with the JTAG debugger. But basically it'll run, they use GDB as part of their open source development, so you can single step inside the microcomputer and examine registers and all that stuff. But then you can't use the USB for serial ports, you have to have a separate bunch of electronics to connect to a USB.
Yeah, I don't know any way to do things like single stepping on the Atmega. It's possible that if Atmega has an AVR development environment for their 32-bit chips, and I'm not sure if it would work for the 16-bit chips or not. I haven't tried it because I find it harder to use than the tools I currently use. Yeah.
I'm trying to develop some software to control a robotic hand and arm. I saw that on the screen it said that you have 32 kilobytes of memory. Do you know if there is software to develop an advanced neural network that would run on the Arduino?
You wouldn't want to do that on an Arduino. You know, anything like that, you'd want more processing power.
Can you tell us about the community, maybe in the Silicon Valley, about Arduino and hardware, open source hardware?
No, that's a really good question. There have got to be 1 million people doing this stuff in Silicon Valley. I don't know them. I don't know where they go. I think we really need a hackerspace devoted to things like electronics and Arduinos and so forth, and I don't know of one. Do you know?
Has anybody ever heard of a place called the Hacker Dojo?
Yes.
How many people, would they please raise their hands if they would as a volunteer, who have visited the Hacker Dojo and have seen the hardware space? Oh, you have not seen the hardware space. When you walk through the front doors, the door immediately to your right goes into the Bat Cave. No magic is allowed.
Well,
It's
what fun
all
is
hardware. It's all, they have a whole bunch of things. They have large magnifying glasses, microscopes. People are hacking all kinds of hardware stuff there all the time. You don't have to be a member to go in and use it. It is welcome that you come in, and it would be nice if you became a member, but it's a very good hardware space. People are doing things maybe not so simple as this or as complicated as this, but people are also doing things where they're doing hardware hacks on their Androids or their phones and other things like that, if not only a repair.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news. I
If you
had
Google
seen
for
the
it,
hackerspace, but it was always empty when I saw it. So. What?
The tech shop has some hardware stuff as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw them doing meetups on Arduino.
Yeah.
So weekend.
Okay.
I haven't gone to it.
Arduino so easy.
Another way to use the Silicon Valley Homebrew Robotics, hbrobotics.org. It's not specifically Arduino focused to bring people to all platforms. They meet people for even less things. They run as something less just over there.
Oh, okay. So Homebrew Robotics. I'm going to check that out.
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. Homebrew Robotics goes back many, many years, I believe. And I forget, what was the guy's name, Richard? He used to run it.
Dick
Yeah,
Prather.
still around?
long time ago.
Okay. So the homebrew robotics predates Linux and BSD users group, and you'll find a lot of cool people there that know something. If you've ever looked in the magazine and they have this thing called Muscle Wire, that's in there. One of the guys who's from the Homebrew Robotics Club sells it. Well, it's actually two guys. And John was over there, John Silko and I met him when they were nothing. They were just putting ads in magazines, and now they've got a great company. You know, and it's one of the backbones of the robotics industry. Back to you.
I've seen articles about the high school projects for robotics. They have some competition every spring. Do they use these devices, or do they do something else?
I have not heard of a high school robotics project using Arduinos yet, and I don't understand why not.
Do you know what they do use?
I've heard of, I
Because I
think,
noticed, I have a friend who has a kid in high school, and he's in a robotics class. It's some company that sponsors this.
I've heard,
No, it's not Lego. But there's somebody else, yeah, but it's something like that.
I've heard of high school programs
Concord
using
High
Peck
School, they're doing a thing
microcontrollers
like that.
or basic stamp microcontrollers, maybe some of the older ones, but
It's more complicated than basic scan. More capable, more packaged.
okay.
Yeah.
It's more like a Mindstorm.
It's certainly in that vein.
Long line.
But I'm drawing a blank as to what the name of the company was.
So there are these, also these chip kit, 32-bit processors that are pin compatible with Arduino and take all the same peripherals. And, being 32-bit processors, and they have a variety of boards. They're also open source hardware. There's about half a dozen vendors for them. And they're also very interesting, just because there's a giant ecosystem of accessories for Arduino. They basically all will work with this 32-bit chip kit. So and it's also, chip kit boards they're about the same price as Arduino. Some of them that are like $25, so that's also very appealing.
Anybody who's interested in this ought to go to the Embedded System Conference. It's in San Jose. It's coming up reasonably soon.
Yeah, 2 months.
Yeah.
3 days. It's a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
And
Yeah, if you register,
go there, a lot of the vendors give away stuff.
yeah, I got an Atmega chip, a demo unit from Atmega last year, which I still haven't done anything with.
Away,
but-
stuff.
Yeah.
NXP gives away stuff. You can easily walk away with a couple $100 worth of hardware.
Yeah.
Not only that, if you register, at least if you register ahead of time, you can get the exhibit area for free. Takes us a little bit of plan ahead, because it's posted during the day, you might have to figure out the work schedule, but it's well worth it.
And last year in the exhibit hall, they had a T-Rex skeleton, a real one, so that was pretty cool. I don't know if they're doing that this year. Any other questions? Well, thanks a lot. And feel free to come up and look at stuff.
Performing without a net.
There's usually a bunch of us about this time who are both gregarious and hungry. So, for those of you who are interested, we typically go over to Frankie, Johnny, and Luigi's 2 restaurant, which is on the far side of El Camino between Shoreline and Castro in Mountain View. So, there is typically a bunch of people who want to go there. Can I have a show of hands about who wants to go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Just so we know how big a table to ask for.
One other quick thing, because the guy mentioned the Embedded Systems Conference, and triggered a memory. A month ago, I was at the Android Silicon Valley meetup, which is in Palo Alto, right by the freeway. And I was talking to people there about trying to get Debian on tablets. Had an extended conversation with a guy for about an hour, and he was saying probably because some of the tablets that are available now have a substantial component of closed hardware, he was suggesting that I, and maybe other people interested, go to the Embedded Systems Conference and say, what would it take for vendors to get a tablet device which is totally open, because it's created as open hardware by the community rather than by a company who wants closed hardware. And then on this, it would be very straightforward, because if things all open, you can put Linux on it. So that's another plug for a reason to go to the Embedded Systems Conference and ask about, you know, how to get hardware and then a display to make like an open design tablet. Why don't you talk to me about
one last announcement here so we all can get out of here. We should be out of here right about now. The BSD users group meets tomorrow night. We're meeting at Yahoo. We usually meet over at IX System or Hacker Dojo. So you go to bafug.org if you're interested in BSD. And then next week at this same time in this same location, the ACCU meets, Association of C++ Users, and that's it. Let's all get out of here.
What's the BSD topic?
7 o'clock.
What's the topic? Is there a meeting?
Whenever, I don't know. Look on the website.
I plugged in 2 words to Google.
Yeah, oh no, that art. Hacker Dojo.
So hold on just a second. I'm going to find that lady and who? What's the dude who was sitting right back here? The guy who was with us. He disappeared right in front of my eyes. Right? Well, anyway, he's okay. Hold on a second.
You look over and you go, oh, there it is. Because there's so many bushes and things.
And they do all kinds of different guys that do all kinds of funky stuff there.
So you're gonna go to the dinner?
No, I gotta head back.
From the people that are
Tomorrow,
there.
I gotta get Pike on at 8 o'clock.
And everybody, Dojo is, I believe, from Orient.
Good to see you. Yeah, I was glad I got a chance to go here. I was gonna email you.
Oh, yeah. Good things, yeah, and some are free and some are paid for. You go to the website and see that, or you can go to the building. They're open 24 hours a day. You can go by the front door. Yeah, you go in there. If you go by the 3 in the morning, there's somebody there. You go, like, drive down there right now if you want to go look at it. Oh, that wasn't me.
I didn't realize it was her until I think.
I've been trying to do it.
I hadn't looked at the
So do you know if the Arduino has open network or configured?